Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America online, thisweekinamerica.us. Great to have you spending some time with us on the program today. Robert Maxxim back with us. He was born in Cuba, moved to the U.S., and grew up in California. After studying music, science, and religion, he devoted his life to write about his sleep time visits to other worlds and alien craft encounters, highlighting life's true virtues and purpose. In 2014, he published the first in a series of 5 legacy episodes, The Search for Love, followed by The Unholy Menace. His books have earned industry acclaim, making frequent appearances in news, radio, book fairs, and conventions, and numerous appearances. And he's back with us on This Week in America. Robert Maxxim. Robert, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me on the show, Rick.
It is always fun having you on the program, and you really poke and prod the audience here. We asked them to participate and send us some questions, and they have done that. We've got a bunch for this one, and they're all over the place in terms of questions. In fact, we've got like literally dozens of questions that were backed up here. And if during the course of the program there's something that you would like to talk about, something you would like Robert to talk about, a question, get a hold of us by either going to either one of the websites, thisweekinamerica.us or rgaten.com, and I'll give you those throughout the program. Robert, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Let's start with this one. I disagree with your statement that God does not say convert others. There are numerous references to converting in Scripture. They quote Romans 10:13, 15. Also powerful, they say, is Luke 14:23. I pulled here just in Romans, it concludes with, and how are they to preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the good news. And Luke, what they're talking about there, I believe, is, and the master said to the servant, go out to the highways and hedges and compel people to come in, that my house may be filled. Those are the two examples to use, saying actually he did ask us to go convert.
Oh, it's unfortunate that people hang on to and fight for bad interpretations rather than humbly learn truth. I just can't make this one brief. The listener is leaning on biblical substitutions, and I'll say it one last time. Stop using translations. Let's look at this from the top. Jesus in Luke 14:23, what happens is it first invites the mundane to a feast, but they decline. Jesus lets them go, doesn't try to convert them, and they leave. That's clue number 1. Clue number 2. He then calls on the poor or the humble that are living in highways. Now, the word highway is mistranslated. The Greek word for highway is hados. Now, hados means the way. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
Jesus used that same word in John 14:6 when he said, I am the way. So who doesn't know that? So does that mean that there are infidels needing conversion that are in the way in Hadas? No. So why convert God's elect? You see what I mean?
Yes.
This parable means that the elect will gather to God when called upon, giving the mundane priority first. But if they refuse, leave them alone. So, listener, you got this all backwards. If you don't read the original, you are, in a sense, making a grave mistake. Don't distort God's word to amass souls to your interpretation, especially when you are a church official. That parable goes against Romans 10. And Romans 10 suggests fetching anybody everywhere. That's not what Luke says. Obviously, whoever wrote Romans is in conflict with Jesus and thus cannot be a true disciple. Consider also that by converting, something that Jesus never did, you exalt yourself, your ego, over your brother, saying, I know, I'm covered. You're not. You better be mine, else you die. No choice, right?
Yes.
Who gave us the right to accuse and judge the speck in your brother's eye, not seeing the log in your own? Jesus wouldn't have that. Luke 14:11 says, "Whoever exalts himself shall be abased, and who humbles himself shall be exalted." It's just a few verses away from that parable. So connect the dots. Why were Jesus' sermons about humility, benevolence, love, keeping evil in check, leaving it up to you to set your own house in order and leave others alone? You might say, well, if I don't preach, how will people find the way? Well, Jesus tells us how. We're born with the way, folks. We don't need preaching. Be humble. Show humility. That's all the reminder that we need to give people so that they find the way. Act it. Don't lip it. That's the way.
So often, and we discussed this before, that when they pick and choose, as they did Romans 10:13, 15, and Luke 14:23, pick and choose, if they read just a little bit further or pick it up a little bit earlier, it sort of changes what it is they're using for their argument. Am I seeing that correctly?
But not only that, Rick, this is in plain sight. If they would only read the entire parable and see that, number one, the mundane were given the chance. They were allowed to make their choice and leave undisturbed. Once they decline, then who's left? Those that are in the way, the humble. Gather, come on. And again, you have to know Greek. You have to know that the word for highway is the way, which is God's way, Jesus's way. Who didn't he say that clearly? I am the way, so therefore, God is the way. And who are you going to convert those that are already God's people?
Yes. Yes.
You see the gravity of the situation here, and just how, especially by people who are supposed to know this stuff, just how wrong they're steering people. It's sad. It's sad. It's unfortunate, but that's why there are 43,000 Christian organizations in the world. There's just so much error and confusion and misunderstanding because people do not think, people do not study.
So there are 43,000 Christian organizations. I want to go back to that. I find that staggering. So these are all, well, it's not one group. You've got 43,000 different groups that are out there.
And they all disagree with one another. They would never join.
That's just...
That's unfortunate. I don't like pitting one against the other. That's against God's universal law. But people do consider that God only asks of you one thing: love and be humble. That's all. You don't need to give lip service, because what if the lip service you're giving, like the case with this listener, he's wrong. He's dead wrong.
Robert Maxxim, our guest in the program. The website is rgaetan.com. Comments, questions for future programs. You can also do it by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. We've touched on this topic a number of times. Are you thinking you're maybe making a little headway out there and getting people to slow down, put on the brakes, and take a more thoughtful look at this?
Well, people are free to believe what they will. And I always say, don't believe what I say. Just before going out into left field, please read carefully, study carefully, do your homework. Don't just blare it out thinking that you got it. This is dangerous. Imagine the harm that you're causing God's people with what you're saying. Be very careful here. It's not only other people's lives at risk by what you're saying, you bear the weight. You bear the consequences of leading people wrong.
Yeah,
Do
there
you
are
have any
serious
idea what that
consequences.
means?
Yeah, there are
Yes.
ramifications here, serious ramifications when you do that incorrectly. So I hope we've addressed that, and you've done that several times, and hopefully at this point they're listening and understanding. Why are people misled? Is it intentional, or is it just a lack of understanding from the person doing the teaching?
Narrows down to one thing, Rick. As much as this will disturb people when they hear it, it is what it is. It's called ego.
Yep. I knew you were coming back there.
Ego. This is not somebody trying to save others. This is somebody trying to show I know stuff. No, you don't. Just because you read it on this translated manuscript, that doesn't make you an authority. And a lot of people go out there supposedly preaching the word. My goodness, uh, I listen to them, and I don't say anything unless they ask me questions. But I am literally crying inside. I am really suffering inside by hearing all of the misconcepts and all of the errors, all of the misconceptions that they have. It's really saddening. And I just have to keep my mouth shut because I can't interfere. But only when they ask a question can I answer. And do they accept the answer? No, no, because their ego is hurt. How can I be wrong? How can 3, 4 billion people be wrong? Well, surprise. It's not that they're wrong, it's that they are one step behind because of the information that they have been given and how it has been given to them. I'm not saying that it's enough to make for a positive life. I'm not saying that, but don't go out and try to convert people who might have the right concept of things, but just because you disagree with it, you want to change them. Maybe you're the one that's wrong. Did you ever think about that? Did you ever think that the people who taught you and trained you for years were themselves wrong? And it's just a scale effect, domino effect that is huge. Error upon error upon error for years, thousands of years. And this was by design. As I said before, the church forefathers wrote down very clearly what Jesus said. And then a lot of stuff was added on top of it, was changed. You don't believe that? No, that's your privilege. If you do want to verify that, please study, research. Maybe the truth is too hard to swallow. Maybe you're too far down the game where you can't break away from these beliefs. I don't want you to break away. But if you ask me, I will tell you.
Well, that listener did ask, and you told them, and we'll move on here in a second. But that's interesting. Again, we've addressed this before. Hopefully, that will answer the question, and maybe others who are listening or watching the program have had a similar question, just not expressed it because of teachings that they have had, and hopefully that will. That will answer that. That's something that I think came out of the last program that we did. Something else that came out of there, we talked about the prosperity gospel, and a listener says, I was upset to hear you trash the concept of the prosperity gospel. I have been taught and firmly believe that financial success, far from distracting us from higher values, is an affirmative of godliness. It's merely God's blessings.
If you thought the previous question was bad, uh, brother, if that's what you want, take it. But again, you asked, so I will tell you. I did not trash prosperity. You thought I did. But I will address your question. It might take me a while, but here we go. Look, higher values, according to Jesus, is the art of giving. It's not taking. Yours is not an affirmation of godliness. Far from it. You made that up. Not Jesus. This is not an affirmation of godliness, but selfishness. Jesus told that young rich man asking how to get to heaven, he told him to sell everything, give it to the poor, and follow him there. Are you telling me that Jesus was wrong? Jesus asked us to care for the poor and make them prosperous, not ourselves. Prosperity is a selfish substitute belief. It's an excuse to get rich off the back of others. It's the brainchild of the Industrial Revolution that considers poverty and sickness a curse from broken faith. That's false. Jesus saw it not as broken faith, but broken responsibility by the rich. And he said that countless times. So much for being our brother's keeper then. Didn't Job suffer poverty and sickness? Not from broken faith, but evil responsibility. Look how his friends treated him. That should be your answer, so people think. Let's take you to 1 Timothy 6, verse 9. Those wanting to get rich fall into temptation, fall into traps, and foolish, harmful desires that plunge people into destruction and ruin. Love of money is the root of all evil. Flee from all of this. Pursue righteousness, faith, and love. Do you want it any clearer?
That pretty well spells it out, yes.
You know, Jesus slammed the rich 18 times. I counted it last week. Matter of fact, the Sanhedrin killed him for it. And he said, don't store treasures on earth, but in heaven. For where your treasure is, your heart is there also. You can't serve two masters, God and dollar. It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter heaven. The poor widow, the rich young man who was to give his goods to the poor and at the church. Do you need more proof? From an economic point of view, the more you make, the less is left for others. Greed makes this world what it is. It's clear. Financial success for the few, chaotic hell for a majority, living one day at a time to no fault of theirs. I don't believe in this curse thing. It's no fault of theirs. There just isn't enough money, Rick, to go around for everyone to succeed because we have top hoarders. That's basic economics.
Yes.
Someone has to pay the price for greed. By design, that's most of us down here. That's why this world bears such anger and crime and drug addiction and all the negativity is going around, just like Timothy said, because of financial abuse. Blessed are the poor, the meek, the merciful, the sincere, that hunger for virtue. It can't be any clearer than that. Oral Roberts kick-started prosperity back in the 40s by combining revival, faith healing, charisma. Everything is beautiful, and reciprocity based on pistis. Pistis is the false Greek faith doctrine. It offers some of the most twisted, worst translated Christ opposing theology ever, misinterpreting the buried talents parable and Malachi's personal pay for blessings verse. Completely misunderstood. Its ministers are the highest paid in the industry, people, and they're liable to no one, much less to God, embezzling billions from victims. In other words, it's kind of like a religious mafia. It's the epitome of ego. You got people like Robert Tilton, Tommy Osborne, Joel Osteen, Creflo Dollar, Kenneth Copeland, Reverend Ike. If there were ever thieves on earth, I would put these people at the top of the list. Now, tell you what, let's look at the other side of the coin here. Let's look at prosperity, what it really does. Let's walk through low-income hoods, projects. Take a look at what your prosperity did. Walk through hospitals. You will not find a single gospel healer healing people there, or prosperity donors, unless they're dying and neither wealth or faith can save them. How about walk to food camps? Are you to be found serving soup? Come on, of course not. Jesus was dirt poor. He didn't have a place to rest his head, but would give the coat off his back for you. Jesus asked the wealthy to invest in their breathing, to feed, to dress, to house, to promote careers, whatever it took to help others, not the self, not to prosper yourself. In other words, practice true love, sacrifice, and humility, not lip service. At times I feel like giving up on this world, Rick, because I just feel that it's not worth the trouble. People use God to benefit themselves, not others. Everything down here is me, 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 and it's tiring. If you want to make yourself rich instead of others, be my guest, but don't sell it in the name of Jesus, because it's not.
A passionate response to that question. If you were listening, watching, and have a question, we're getting into many other areas in what's left of the program today. Feel free to contact us. Robert's website is rgaetan, GAETAN.com. thisweekinamerica.us. There's a viewer's comment section there, and you can just put in your question, and then I will pass those along to Robert, and we will take those on future programs. Let's take a deep breath here. You want to shift gears a little bit and talk about something maybe a little bit lighter, a little bit less threatening than what we just talked about for those last couple of questions. Listener wants to know, was Atlantis the perfect society? And as I think back and look at the pictures on your website, rgaetan.com, I'm looking at that, and after that question, I'm wondering the same thing. It looks like that very well could fall into that category. Was it the perfect society? Or close?
Not entirely. Not entirely. Atlantis was set up to be a healing ward, a spiritual healing ward for this planet. But there, just as you can see here on this show, there are people who seek humility, and there's others that seek selfishness. And they think that selfishness is perfectly okay. So you have those that are humble and those that are selfless. Well, others the opposite. There was always a struggle to rule the humble. That's what destroyed Atlantis, and that's what's destroying us today. History repeats itself. Could it be, Rick, that the same people keep coming back and doing it again and again? Yes, it is. Read all about it in Legacy.
And Legacy is available. Check it out at, of course, Amazon.com, and you can check it out, the link, by going to Robert's website, rgaetan.com, and you can log on directly by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. A series of questions with Atlantis as the theme. That first one was, at the perfect society. Let me sort of take these in order, and you've touched on one of them, one of the questions here. I've read some writers who believe Atlantis to be real, others who insist it's fictional or metaphysical myth. Could it be a myth?
Well, I've vetted 40 historical records on Atlantis, all the way from India to America, in both directions. And these date back thousands of years. They're on my website under Evidence, Atlantis, and also in Legacy. So it's definitely not a myth. Plato was not the only individual who wrote about it.
And that ties in with another question. Plato's account of Atlantis, fictional, true, or blend of truth and fiction?
Plato, he wrote what others like Solon and Hesiod found in Egypt, passing the story on. So Plato did not have a direct, shall we say, contact with the information. He was secondhand. But he was also sensitive, which validated and expounded on these events before writing them. There are also older documents that corroborate Atlantis, even give its location, that are way older, including stories from India and America, like I mentioned. You have, for example, the Book of the Dead, you have Hesiod, you have several Mayan books. Uh, Now, those books were found more recently, but they're ancient. So, all the way from Argentina, all the way up to Alaska, uh, Asia, even Africa. There's a lot of proof about Atlantis out there, and it's unfortunately it's not brought out for some reason.
You know, you mentioned, I got a follow-up question on that here, but you mentioned legacy, and legacy is how we started 3 years ago. I was intrigued by the series, got in touch with you, and we've been doing programs ever since then. I think it's been about a 3-month window when we actually started this. Legacy, it's not, it's a, how do I describe it? It's a science fiction story based on the truth, which is probably contradictory, but that's how I will describe it. And then it's got a lot of great fact in there, but it's not like you're reading a reference book of any kind, is it? It's told in great story form, the story being you.
It is, and I could have written a book of facts, but it would have been very difficult for individuals to really absorb the culture. When you live life through these characters in Legacy, you're absorbing, you're understanding, you're reliving, remembering that culture.
Yes.
And that's what Legacy was meant to do. And when you read it, then you begin to remember. So stories like Plato's or like Hesiod, that's what they're missing. And they're describing the city, they're describing the landmass, but they're not describing how people lived, how they thought, their language, their beliefs. That is missing, and that's what needs to be brought out.
There's a relatability as you're reading it that you don't get if you're reading just a dry a textbook reference book. And it's the Legacy series information at Robert's website. And again, you can link on directly by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. You mentioned the destruction of Atlantis. One writer, listener writes in, how was Atlantis destroyed? I believe from my religion class in high school, it was destroyed by pagans. Was it the abuse of psychic and supernatural powers or floods and volcanic eruptions?
Yes and no. There was an outcast group called the Sons of Belial. It was a decadent priesthood that eventually took over and cast spiritual progressive values into the dirt. They didn't know how to work the power towers, and they were about to destroy the planet. And a few scientists who escaped Atlantis came back to save it. I was one of them. And we thought we fixed it, but not really. The priesthood scientists, what they did is they caused magma plumes to rise beneath Atlantis. In Legacy, I explained how these towers worked and how they managed mantle plumes and what have you to store energy. So we tried to push that plume back, and we did. But that created a massive hole in the crust beneath the towers and where the magma was. So what happens when you leave a hole behind?
Yes.
The land caved in. At least the planet didn't explode, but Atlantis did. The priesthood abused the towers. They put shields around Atlantis. They put subliminal messages into the magnetic field. They caused storms and earthquakes everywhere on the planet they chose. They were basically at war with anyone who believed in spiritual values. But by doing so, they caused a regenerative plume to head up the mantle, and it almost blew the planet up.
If you have questions, let us know, and you probably will as we talked here a couple of shows ago. We got a number of responses with that, and a follow-up to that. As you're going through, and I'm very interested in your answer on that question. The next one, do we need to know the past lessons of Atlantis and Lemuria to understand the future, to survive the future?
Yes, we do. And not just for the sake of society, but for your own evolution. Takeaways from past lives include being selfless And that what you do against your fellow man, even a rock or an atom, you do against the same energy that keeps you alive. That's another answer for the supposed prosperity followers. You must respect and serve, not you, but the infinite, as it was meant to be. Because it's your own home, your soul, that you're messing with. Leave creation alone, please. And put your own house in order, not someone else's. Don't possess or make things your way. Let creation be a service, and flow with infinite energy, not against it. That's the critical lesson from Atlantis and Lemuria that we have yet to learn. And if we don't, if we keep trying to push people to our beliefs, and if we try to continue hoarding finances and making the poor poorer, we're only going to repeat. And I'll mention it one last time. We will continue to repeat what happened in Lemuria and Atlantis and Egypt and all these civilizations. That's what brought them down, and we're about to destroy ourselves.
Robert Maxxim, our guest on This Week in America, Maxxim. Information at his website, argaton.com. Information on the topics we're talking about at unariansunited.com. You can link on directly by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. We encourage your participation. You can do that through comments at either of the websites that I just mentioned. If you go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, you can pull up past shows, either audio or video. We're available on Facebook as Robert is as well. So if you want to go back and study what Robert has talked about before, you've got an archive to do that at both of the websites. A question, this is interesting as well with Lemurians. In history, I've read that Lemurians studied the physical sciences and also expanded awareness of their psychic abilities. Can you explain?
Yeah, and I think the first two questions today also apply here. It's interesting that those two questions are the crux of all of our problems, Rick. It really is. And Lemurians, I must say yes to the above. Again, here came ego, dressed up as something good, trying to possess. Again, trying to possess and serve its will, not the infinite. Before you knew it, people were being mentally controlled. Spacecraft attacking and destroying Mars, as I mentioned before. Eventually, energy misuse, just as in Atlantis, and nuclear exchange destroyed it around 75,000 BC. And proof of that is in our mitochondria. Look at Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 and 2, and Jeremiah chapter 4, verses 23 through 25 or 26. That will tell you what happened. And I'll say it again. Please, don't take it as an offense. Please. But do consider the reciprocity that occurs when you're selfish, when you make others poor to be rich, when you don't care about your brother, and when you play ego, trying to force people to your way of thinking. That's not what Jesus taught. And as you can see, even in Lemuria, we repeated the same thing. We keep repeating the same thing. We have to come to the point where we say, I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to take one for the team. And I am going to stop. I'm going to stop being this way. It hurts my ego. It hurts my persona. It hurts my pocketbook. But I'm going to do it because enough is enough.
Well said. Question from a listener who has gone to the website, has looked at the images there of Lemuria. In fact, he says he's marveled at the images. And he wants to know, how accurate are those? How do you know? What was like life for the residents? And what was the technology like? So quite a bit there, and because he was impressed with what he saw at your website.
Well, I can say that it's very accurate. I've had some 15 plus visions of it and verified it with those of others. And there are many more I haven't published yet, but episode 3 and 4 will provide all of those details. They're coming, not yet. In short, Lemurians could read and manufacture thoughts. They could change your body at will. And their weapons of mass destruction were far beyond our imagination. Proof is what they did to Mars. Just take a look at Mars today. We did that. Watch episode 4 video for hints. Episode 4 displays what happened. And yes, I was one of those that helped make it happen. My bad. Working on it. People were, for the most part, stupefied under electronic controls. And today, as I said, the history repeats itself. People are stupefied by, shall we say, lifestyles, commercials.
Oh, yes.
It's the same thing that's going on. Politics, especially politics, and in some belief systems, also what people are being taught. Same thing. In Legacy, I provide evidence found nowhere else. Proof of Lemuria is, for the most part, scarce. It's hard to find, and at times, it's compromised by intermixed events. So I used scientific, genetic, historical, biblical, and geographic methodology to confirm its existence based on my viewings. I would not take my viewings seriously until I had some evidence. But to be honest, there isn't that whole lot. You really have to dig deep to find it.
And you'll find the information, the evidence at Robert's website. And again, you can link on directly by going to our website as well, thisweekinamerica.us. Time going by way too quickly, moving through a lot of topics and a lot on Atlantis and Lemuria that we had just talked about. Several that I think we'll have time to get to on this program. Then we'll do follow up with the remaining questions and any new questions that come in. During my near-death experience, I felt like my problems were gone. The weight of the world lifted. I did not see a white light or angels. It was like I was looking down on clouds. Was this a true experience or was it a dream?
I'll bet it was true. What basically happened is that the listener unhitched his caboose, his lower self, and that feels great. I mean, no worries, no fears. Feel great. Better than falling in love, I can tell you that. That's why we have to come down here so many times, to tame and clean up this lower self until the day it doesn't weigh you down. Then you'll feel great all the time. It's not hard to do. Just be super sincere with yourself and devote it to humility. Humility is the key word. Humility and serving others. If you can't tame that lower self, it's because you don't want to.
When I hear of near-death experiences, I think of a white light, the listener asked, a tunnel, even angels. Is that what death is like?
Pretty much. I've seen it, but it goes on from there, passing into celestial worlds that are just magnificent, with beauty beyond imagination. It's not pearly gates with clouds. It doesn't have a check-in desk,
yes,
concierge and hearts. No, it doesn't have that. Check out the Venus video on my website. That will give you some idea of what's beyond that tunnel.
And the website is rgaetan.com. I give that because I know people come in and out of the program, and that's RGAETAN. I go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. You can link on directly. We're trying to get a few more questions in today's program. Who makes the rules in your world? Who decides who is reincarnated and as what?
Great question. Prior life decisions determine future outcome. Just as a person reaps what he sows, same with where we're born. Defects and what we must face, situations. We reap actions, even those from this very same life. It's pretty much like selecting core and elective courses in college. So do you elect learning situations in lives. So you're the one that chooses what to come into and when to come.
Interesting. Go to the website, thisweekinamerica.us. You will find all of the programs that we've done with Robert going back about 3 years, video and audio as well. Interesting question here, and we've talked about this before as well. Do we commute back and forth between other worlds? Do we live multiple lives at the same time?
Yes and yes. And not just physically,
Ooh, interesting.
but in other dimensions, including spiritual planes. I have seen myself in double lives at the same time. And I do know that there are thousands of consciousness levels of myself that are experiencing at the same time within the same soul. It's hard to explain. But actually, I'll give you an example. Let's say you're walking down the park, you're nice and calm, and all of a sudden somebody says something derogatory to you, and you become angry. You become a different person, don't you?
Yes.
Okay? That person was there all the time. Somebody says something very loving to you, and your consciousness changes. You become humble. You become pliant. That's you. It was there all along. So you have different stages of emotions and consciousness all the way up to your higher self, thousands of them. So yes, you live in other dimensions at the same time you're living here, and when you're here, you could be experiencing two lives. It's not unusual.
Fascinating. I'm still trying to absorb that, the answers to that. That is interesting, and hopefully we'll get some follow-up questions on that for future programs. Is deja vu actually visions from a past life?
They can be, but so are premonitions. So for the most part, deja vu can be a memory, either from this life or from a past life. Premonitions can also be from a spiritual essence, or it can be also a sort of deja vu. So yes.
Interesting. We've had questions like that before, and it's always fascinating. As you get people go back and they examine their lives and they see something that may be on a higher level than what we think it is. We think of deja vu as just a feeling. There may be something more there, more significant there. Make this probably the final question, and this may take a little while. What is the relationship between karma and reincarnation?
Karma is a state of being, accountability, while reincarnation is a process. So in reincarnation, you're dealing with karma situations you set up to solve. So they are, in a way, they're two separate things.
It's interesting. When people mention karma, is that concept valid?
Yes, it's very valid. However you take karma, it's valid. Karma is a set of responsibilities, accountabilities that you have to face. And some are good, some are not so good. So they are all encapsulated into a reincarnation process. Now, most of us will go through the karma process completely ignoring it and doing nothing about it. The key to karma, I'll say it again, this is the theme of this entire discussion. And Rick, I think from this point forward, I will let listeners deal with their own beliefs. But there's only one belief that we should understand, and that is we have to be humble, and we have to be responsible for our thoughts and actions. Nothing else matters.
So if we take care of ourselves, we'll be okay.
Love yourself as you would love others. It's out there in plain sight. Keep that in mind. It's not about hoarding. It's not about being prosperous. It's about loving you to be prosperous, and more than money, in spirit, and being loved and being appreciated regardless of what you believe, and be respected, and to be left alone to deal with your own problems. That is the way.
So much great information in the program today. If you joined us through the program and you would like to go back and pick it up from the very beginning, you can do that by archives at thisweekinamerica.us. The audio, we're on, of course, iTunes and all of those places, Podomatic, and you can link on directly by going to the website. YouTube for the videos, and if you have questions for Robert, and I'm sure you will after today's program, you can submit those either through Robert's website, rgaetan, GAETAN.com, or thisweekinamerica.us. Information on Robert's topics available, of course, at unariansunited.com. Robert, we really covered a lot of ground today. I think put a final answer on some of those questions at the beginning of the program in talking about being out and actually converting and spreading the gospel and the prosperity gospel. So much more that we want to talk about. Many more questions that we'll get to that we didn't get to on the program today. We will do that next time. Thank you, as always, for being with us on the program. A very informative day, and it always takes me like a couple of hours afterwards to go back and sort of sort out what we just talked about and try to incorporate it in my life. So you gave us a lot to think about on the program today.
My pleasure. Listeners, please love one another and respect one another for what you believe. Let people learn about creation and about God through the way that you act, not the way you talk.
Very simple,
that's how Jesus taught people.
Very simple philosophy, and it works. Again, you're listening to This Week in America. Information on Robert Maxxim and the Legacy series at our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and Robert's website, which is rgaetan, rgaetan.com, talking about the Legacy series. You're listening to This Week in America, and we are back on today's program right after these messages.